Hi everybody, thank you very much for joining us. I'm Scott and I'm sitting here with David Hancock. He is the founder of Morgan James Publishing. He is also the author of The Entrepreneurial Author, Achieving Success and Balance as a Writer in the 21st Century. You can check out this book and other books that Morgan James puts out at morganjamespublishing.com. Right now, David, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. Appreciate you.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation today about your background as a publisher and writer and how you've been able to take people from having not written a book to all the way to just putting them up on the New York Times bestseller list.
Right.
There's some really cool things, but before we get into kind of the questions I had, the extra ones that we couldn't get to, how about you go ahead and tell a little bit about yourself and how this Morgan James Publishing all got started?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting path because I didn't start out as a publisher. I actually had a career in other things before I started the house. But I realized early on that publishing was broken, and I wanted to figure out a way to make it better, to solve it. So I was a banker back in the 90s, actually here in Hampton Roads, and I was fat, dumb, and happy. I never imagined doing anything else. And they were paying me stupid money. And I was, I barely passed high school. I dropped out of college. I had nothing really to offer other than my rugged personality and good looks, but good looks was questionable. But I realized as a banker that I was competing with literally 1,000 people in this community offering, in essence, the same product and service. I mean, really, it was. So I had to figure out ways to stand out. I had to figure out ways to add value. I had to figure out ways to really keep those clients and get the referrals, but so was everybody else. Mm-hmm. And in banking, I had an unlimited ad budget. I could spend as much money as I wanted to on anything that's even remotely related to advertising or marketing or promotion. It just didn't work as well as some of the other things that I was trying to figure out to do. But it was a very competitive market. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I discovered that I needed to always stay ahead of the game. I needed to always be, on top of the product knowledge. I needed to always be ahead of the competitors' products, but I also needed to make sure that I could be exactly what the consumer or the client needed me to be and try to add value to them and stay out of their way, because that was one of the biggest things. That even today, that's where we succeed the most. So long story short, I ended up getting out there and going to all the conferences. I mean, in this 90s, man, there were a lot of great things, still today too, but a lot of the things that were available. I mean, I went to Zig Ziglar, Tom Hopkins, Todd Duncan, Bill Backrack. I went to all of them, and it was really good. I implemented everything, and I earned a little bit more money. I fine-tuned some processes. I hired a couple assistants, and just very impactful, but nothing gave me that bolster in my career that I was looking for. This is a long answer to a great question, by the way. But it wasn't until I discovered a book that ended up changing my life. Now, the book was called Guerrilla Marketing. Mm-hmm. It was in its third edition. I'm sure everybody's heard of it, but it was by a guy named J. Conrad Levinson. And again, like I said, I had never heard of him. It had sold 15 million books before I even got a copy of the book. And I don't even remember where it came from. I tease that somebody gave it to me or divinely left to my desk or I stole it. I don't know which one. I'm pretty sure it's still. But it changed my life. Mm-hmm. But the way it changed my life was because of the author. I ended up developing a relationship with the author. I read the book. I resonated with the book. I realized, hey, what I'm doing was out of the box. It was unconventional. I was doing more things with my time, my energy, my imagination instead of the bank account to buy advertising. But what really changed my life was the one statement in the book that says, if you need more help, reach out to me. In essence, it was basically that simple. And I reached out to the author, and he responded. Ended up developing a relationship with him, hired him as a coach, and he taught me really nothing more than the book. But the relationship was very valuable. It was affirming, I should say, that what I was doing was right. Mm-hmm. But he did take it one step further. In fact, he gave me some very important points, one of which he dragged out, which tortured me, but it ended up being the significant thing. So, the first thing he said to me, David, if you wanted to charge more and negotiate less, I mean, who doesn't? I mean, right? Mm-hmm. He says, you've got to keep doing what you're doing because it's obviously working. And because I was a top producer, I was having fun, I was making stupid money. Mm-hmm. But he said, you've got to keep doing what you're doing, but you need to add one more thing. And it sounded so simple, like, wow, what's this one thing? But he didn't immediately tell me, of course. So then he went on to say that, David, if you wanted to have the clients that would never give you the time of day, those whale of clients, those big clients that you just wish you could do business with, mm-hmm. if you wanted to have them start banging on your door, begging to get on the calendar and trying to throw money at you, you've got to keep doing what you're doing. But you need to add one more thing. And I'm like, he's right. I have these clients that if I could get their business, man, my life would be set. We all have those mm-hmm. whale of clients. Mm-hmm. But he went on to say that, David, if you wanted to have the media call you when something happened in the banking business, you've got to keep doing what you're doing, but you need to add one more thing. Now, I really hadn't thought of the media aspect, but sure enough, I would imagine that if you're on the radio or television every week, that would certainly make you a little bit more of an important person to talk to in your day job.
Yes.
But it was that one more thing that kept eluding me, but he finally told me. Mm-hmm. And it was like, Jay, I was ready to strangle him at this point, but he finally told me, he said, David, you need to write a book. Well, I didn't get it. I really didn't get it. I literally laughed out loud thinking he's joking with me. He's going to tell me the real thing in a second. And it was like, I mean, I hope I wasn't too, disrespectful, but he was a very gracious man. I love him dearly. But he said, basically, I need to write a book. And he said, think about it. He said, all these seminars that you've been going to, they've been based on books, right? Right. And all these, home study courses that you've been buying and implementing and using, they've all been based on books, right? Yes. He said, all these books you've been reading, because I was amassing a library, so all these books you've been reading, well, they're books, right? I'm like, yeah. So finally it hit me like a ton of books. Part-time comedian. I had to wake you up.
Yeah.
So it finally hit me like a ton of, it really did. I was like, wow, I guess this guy's smarter than me. I guess he might be right. So sure enough, we sat down and thought about how could we write a book. And for me, I didn't know what in the world I could possibly put in a book. What value could I actually have? I was struggling to be unique. I was struggling to be successful, and it was working, but how do I put that in a book, and why would anybody care? But he basically sat down with me and he said, don't think about the book. This is very powerful. He said, don't think about the book because it's too overwhelming. You know that old how do you eat an elephant thing? Same thing with the book. You do it one word, in essence, at a time, one chapter at a time. So for me, very literal in thinking, he said, what if you could sit down with your best possible client, and he just gave you an opportunity to give the points that you wanted to share with him, why he needs to know you, what are they going to get out of it, the relationship. If you could just write those things down before that person runs out. If you could have 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 things that you would want to get across before they ran out of the room screaming, do that. So literally I said, okay, well, before they left, I want to make sure that he knew that I knew how to do this or that this would work, or I just basically wrote down the beginning of an outline. And I didn't think about the big picture, I thought about the pieces. Then as I started to write, I realized, well, I had already had some content. I had articles, we didn't have blogs back then, but in essence we had pieces that we were putting together. And then I kind of filled in the blanks on the outline, and sure enough, I ended up getting a book done in about 30 days. I was like, oh my gosh, that was amazing, and it's actually hopefully decent. And of course I hired an editor to help me make sure it sounded good, and then it worked. And then I ended up getting it picked up by a publisher. I didn't realize that was a hard thing to do. But that was where the process really started for me. The getting picked up by a publisher was awesome, but it was one of the worst experiences I had ever gone through because I lost all control of everything. And I'm not necessarily a control freak, but I had no input in the cover, no input in the title, no input in the final content, much less the price. I mean, all that stuff those decisions were made for me. And I have since learned that's typical publishing. I didn't like that, but it worked. In less than 8 months, I literally doubled my income. I truly just doubled all my fees and nobody negotiated with anymore. So I doubled my income, and then sure enough, the people that would never give me the time of day started to beg to get on my calendar and want to do business with me. Now, I had to swallow my pride because I wanted to say, yeah, not now, but I wanted their money and their referrals. And then sure enough, the media called me on a regular basis. I was on TV and the radio consistently, weekly, talking about what's going on in the banking business because I was a local person who had the authority to talk about it. So I immediately rose above everybody else. I was the same hustler. Yesterday I was a hustler in a good way, and today I'm like this recognized authority. It was actually laughable, but it was an amazing process. But the whole not being a fun process was really sticking on me because I didn't even like the cover, had no input in the title, didn't like the title when it came out. And when I got the book, they added chapters to the book. Now it was good, but I didn't know it until I actually got the book in my hand. It was very frustrating. So then I ended up writing, what was the question again? Okay, sorry. I ended up writing.
No, yeah, I'm enjoying hearing this story. It's
good.
Really good.
So I ended up writing a second book, and I ended up basically having Jay write one with me. I convinced him to co-author one, and we wrote a book specifically for mortgage bankers. And it was a better experience with him as a co-author, of course, because he sold 15 million books. I'd sold 15. That was a joke. You didn't have to laugh at all of them. But it was fun because the process with Jay was very rewarding. But we had the same difficulties, even with the publisher that he connected us with. We had no input in the final content. We had no input in the cover, no input in the price. Jay owned the title because he's got that trademark. But everything else was the publisher. We even fought about words to use in the book. In fact, this is late 90s, and we couldn't even use the word internet because the publisher thought that was too new or too fad. It wasn't going to be around, or it was going to date the book. It's like, oh my gosh, so it wasn't fun. I ended up selling 40,000 copies of the book to the bank I worked for, so that was fun, but the process was still not very fun. So that still stuck on me, but I realized this is just this is what it is, and what are you going to do about it? But I didn't enjoy it, so I figured maybe I'll self-publish my next couple books and see if I could enjoy that more, because I'm already a success, which you have to be careful when you say that because pride cometh before fall. But so I ended up self-published 2 more books in the years to follow throughout the early 2000s, and I loved it. I loved being in complete control of everything. Now, again, like I said, I'm not a control freak, but I loved knowing what the book was going to look like. I loved loving the book. It was my content, my baby. It was all me. But nobody cared. I had limited distribution. Amazon was still young at the time. Self-publishing is significantly better today than it was back then, but still, it was me saying I was wonderful. That third-party endorsement wasn't there. I struggled selling the books. So basically, me selling them out of my garage. But even with that other authority of the other books behind me, it helped, but it wasn't the same thing. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking, man, what if somebody could blend the best of both worlds and maybe make some publishing house that kind of liked authors, for that matter, but then had the credibility of the professional product, the bookstore distribution, and all that kind of stuff, and I never thought any more about it. It wasn't until I got a little carried away, because as I learned more about guerrilla marketing, I immersed myself in guerrilla marketing, and then I grew as a banker. I flipped to the wholesale side, which means my client was now the old me. I was trying to help them grow their business instead of trying to sell them products. And I would teach them guerrilla marketing principles. Their businesses were exploding. Mm-hmm. And the one weapon that I always kind of fell back on as being the most powerful weapon in your arsenal to grow your business was the book. So here I am on the side. Well, it's my day job, but selling them products and services from the bank, but teaching them how to market their business, teaching them how to market themselves, teaching them how to add value, but also teaching them how to write a book. And many of my clients were writing books and their businesses were exploding. Of course, that means my business was exploding. And then many of them were self-publishing books, and it was better than doing nothing at all, and their businesses were exploding. But I kind of created this monster on the side. Because now I'm spending maybe 2 hours a day in the banking business. Now, fortunately, I was a top producer, so somebody said anything to me. So I work about 2 hours a day in the banking business, and the other 22 hours a day helping in the book side. And it was so much fun. But it was my wife that finally said, something's got to change. Because I literally was working, 2 full, in fact, she said this. She said, David, you're working, this is probably the end of 2002, early 2003. She said, David, you're working 2 full-time jobs. You're only getting paid for 1. Granted, we're getting paid crazy money, but I'm never seeing you. I've got 2 small kids at the house now. Something's got to change. We got to get this beast under control. We got to do something. And she was right. I had nothing to offer other than my apologies. But she said, something's got to change. So we ended up sitting down and thinking, okay, what do we do? But she's a big fan of balance and she's a good fan of making sure that I stay home with the kids and whatnot. So we ended up deciding, well, why don't we open up our own publishing house? We ended up naming it after our kids and figured, what if we could maybe develop this plan to help people do what I did, but maybe from a more organized perspective, maybe adding balance in from the start and seeing what would happen. Now, I had nothing to offer, like I said, other than a really great idea, and that was the birth of the publishing house. I forgot. I really, truly forgot what the question was.
You covered probably every question that I've had so far.
Thank you. Good night.
Well, this whole concept of a publishing house that helps authors go through it, like that's the focus of it, was interesting to me. And I think when the first time we met, that really stuck out in my mind, because being a publisher is one thing, but helping guide people through that entire process in a very specific way that you were talking about, along with your story, is very compelling, very, very needed. So let's just say I'm someone who has an idea for a book, and I recognize the value for it. Now, want to increase my own professional growth in my business and grow my business like that, right? So, but I haven't written a book yet. What advice would you give me, or someone like me, just starting out writing a book?
Well, I would confirm that you're heading down the right path, because the book is a powerful tool to add to your arsenal. Mm-hmm. Now, the key with a successful book is the book needs to be good. Mm-hmm. It doesn't need to be the next, whatever. It doesn't have to be the Nobel Prize winning book. It just needs to be good enough that people can benefit from it. So your highest and best content needs to go in the book. Don't reserve any secrets for them to meet you in person, or secrets that you might want to offer them later. You put your best stuff in the book. In fact, content is key. There's only a couple things that might be on par with a book on its content, but if a book doesn't deliver on what the reader's expecting it to do, really, if you can't tell the reader how they can get out of the book or do the things that they need to be a success, it's just going to fall flat. There may still be some ways to leverage it, but then you'll lose credibility because you don't have anything really good to say.
How do I know what content to put in there? Like, we all have multifaceted lives, right? And how do I know, just writing, that what I want to write about will be beneficial? Like, I may think it is, but how do I know that other people will find it beneficial?
Well, it's a good thing to employ a team to help you figure out what might be best. You certainly can go certain ways by yourself to figure out, okay, I want to write this, I'm passionate about this, but never hesitate to bring in an editor early on or talk to friends. Don't keep it to yourself. A lot of people this is actually funny. A lot of people will actually have a book tomorrow that they thought of today and never mentioned it to anybody else, and then they're out there peddling a book that nobody knew was coming and nobody had any input, and it's like not the greatest thing in the world. So never hesitate to recruit a team to kind of help you get there. But really, it's all about your passion, especially from a business perspective, because what if you write a book that turns out to be a great success and you don't like that content, or that content's not the most important thing to you at the moment? So always try to figure out what topic can do this. And this is how I start with authors who have choices. What content could you write today that could give you the highest authority in your current aspect of making money, your day job, if you will? What book could you leverage the most from you being the authority? What book would you have the most fun and the easiest process of talking about? What content would you have the easiest to talk about if the media called you today? That's the one to write first. That's the one to leverage first, because your second, third, fourth book could be the more funner ones, or additional books. For instance, people say, I want to write a memoir. That's great. You've got a great life, you've got lots of great experiences, but if nobody knows you, nobody's going to buy your book. So you start with the book that benefits the reader and you simultaneously, hopefully one that doesn't benefit you more than a reader, but the content's got to be good. But once you've established that platform and you being an authority, the other books come easier. Then the memoir, everybody want to buy because they already know, love, and trust you.
Well, what role does social media play in all this? You're talking about know and trust and having a reputation. There are people out there that have no reputation and no Twitter followers and Facebook and all that. What role does social media in following what role does that play in the success of a book?
Oh, it's significant. And of course, our social presence has always been a very important factor for centuries. How it's played out and how people discover you and how people learn about your presence is different today, but it's a necessary evil. I don't like Twitter, I don't like Facebook, I don't like this. Get over it. You have to. You've got to be everywhere. In fact, I'm always telling authors you've got to be current, because your message needs to be current to what's going on in the world today. It needs to be relevant so they can actually benefit from reading it. It needs to be consistent in the delivering of your message to the world, and you need to be everywhere. Well, everywhere really sucks. So you can use technology to make it easier for you, but you've got to be engaging with the world and all those platforms. Think about it also from a guerrilla marketing perspective. People have got to hear about you like over 27 times before they even start thinking that they might even know what you're talking about, or start wanting to pay attention to you. And what better way to do it with multiple attacks? You don't see many people being very successful at just doing one thing. You can't find an author or a celebrity that's just on Twitter. You've got to be everywhere, and we have to think the same thing. Now, it can grow. You can go from zero to hero in just a matter of time by just following best practices of communicating. So you need to encourage your readers or your fans and followers. You need to educate them. You need to entertain them to a certain degree, and you need to let's see, encourage, entertain, educate, inspire. If you can do that, your audience will grow.
You said author and celebrity in the same sentence. So are authors, do they have to start thinking of themselves as a celebrity?
As humbly as possible, yes, because a lot of the consumers, the general person thinks of authors as celebrities. Whether we are or not is left up to the world, but you've got to start thinking that mindset, and you need to be as humble as you can about it. But yes, not everybody wants to write a book, but not everybody does it, and not everybody writes a good book. So you've got to make sure you put yourself in that mindset.
I remember you talking during your speech, you talking about how the success of a book, or from a publisher's perspective, it's 80% the author.
For us, right.
Right. So what makes a good author?
So that's a good question.
That would work well with the publisher.
And this may be different with different publishers, but for us, we've got a very entrepreneurial mindset. So what we look for is an author that's a hustler, that wants to do something good in the world. But they have to have good content that, just as I mentioned, they have to have good content that the reader can benefit from it. I mean, that is paramount. If the reader can't benefit from writing your book, you've failed before you even started. So an author's got to be able to be passionate and excited about their content. They've got to write it good. It's got to be good that somebody can benefit from it. But then it's also got to be, why are you doing it? What's the real purpose? Now, we're talking about how to leverage a book to grow a business. That sounds very selfish, and sure, it might be to a certain degree, but ultimately you've still got to service your client, your reader, because that word of mouth is where your celebrity status will actually come from. And if that word of mouth is, this is a horrible book, then you've really started to fail. So you've got to deliver on the content. But we want to work with authors that are passionate, enthusiastic, and they're coachable. That's one of the biggest things for us. We want them to understand that there's a very specific path to follow to be a success, and if you're willing to follow those steps, those best practices, with or without a budget. I don't care if you have $1 million budget to market yourself or market your business, or if you're doing it entirely on a shoestring budget. If you can just follow the best practices of being current, consistent, relevant everywhere, and adding value to the world, it can work. Now, I will say that 80 to 90% of your content throughout all those channels needs to be about them. What can they get out of knowing you? How can you educate them? But the other 1 to 10 to 20%, depending on the time, needs to be about you. You know, the fact that you've got a book, or that you're talking about a book, or that you've been picked up by a publisher, or that the book is now available for pre-order. And you've got to build that story, but yet that's only a part of it. So that's what we're looking for in an author, is somebody that's willing to do all that, that's got something good to say. And here's the icing on the cake for us. If doing all that works, if you can benefit from writing the book, that's where I get really excited. If you can become the authority, if you can charge more and negotiate less yourself, if you can grow your platform because you wrote that book, that's where I get really excited. Because it's hard to sell books. In fact, we can talk numbers if you want to. Books don't sell the numbers that you think they do. You hear in the media that John or Jane Doe sold 5 million books. Well, that's not normal, as you can imagine. Average numbers, the typical book, a typical author, typical publisher, even if it's a big house, the average number of books that an author will sell is 1,000 copies. 1,000 copies. It's nothing. Who makes money on 1,000 copies? Nobody. It's usually because somebody gives up on it too early. Could be the publisher because it didn't happen fast enough. It could be the author because it didn't happen fast enough, or they got shy, or they got bashful, or they listened to a naysayer. We can even talk about that too one day if you want to, because it happens. But somebody gives up on the book. But if you can make money because of the book, then the book is a success. And if you can keep the book alive longer because it's part of your regular marketing or part of your business, the book can be relevant for years, and you can make good money from the book, but you can make significant money because of the book.
Is that what you mean by giving up on the book? Because when I hear that, I think giving up on the book, like giving up writing it, but you're talking about giving up promoting it.
Exactly.
And like keeping it alive.
Yeah, so a lot of people, more people give up on writing it or don't finish the book, and then the ones that actually make the book, somebody gives up on it too quick. And oftentimes it is the publisher because it didn't happen right out of the gate. I'll give you a great story. So have you heard of Chicken Soup for the Soul?
Yes.
Okay, so we all have. So Chicken Soup for the Soul started out as one book. You know, now they sold almost 1 billion books. I'm actually friends with the authors. But they sat down and shared with me their initial story. They did everything right. They did absolutely everything right. Of course, they got turned down 140 plus times before they got the book done. Finally, a health publisher in Florida picked it up because they were on the verge of bankruptcy and they needed a miracle too. But they did everything right. They were on television, they were on the radio, they were doing the media, they were very vocal, they were very engaging, they were very charismatic. It was a great concept of a book, but they sold single digits for months. And when I say months, I mean 18 months they sold, nothing. And it was like, oh my gosh, I would have, be honest with you, I probably would have given up before 18 months of doing this. But they kept doing all the right things. They were doing best practice, but the world just didn't quite get it. So if they had stopped, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation. But what happened was, being consistent and sticking with the message and leveraging the book. After 18 months, some lone reporter at the New York Times stumbled across the book. Not even the book editor. Somebody stumbled across the book and read it, and said, oh, wow, that was pretty good, because it was a really good book. But he was able to write a short article about the book and explain it in such a way that was different than what the authors were saying, but in a way that the rest of the world went, oh, that's what that book's about. And then all of a sudden, boom, it was in the New York Times that week and never has been off the list. Even now, so it's amazing. But so somebody gives up on the book before then. The other part might be the author themselves. That's a great example of an author not giving up, but publishers give up because it happened too quick. Authors give up because it doesn't happen too quick. But authors often give up because of this, and this is what I mentioned a second ago. You write this great book. Now you spend months, it's like giving birth. You spend months working on this book, you spend months editing it and marketing it, promoting it, all before it even hits the streets, for real. So what happens is those people that you love the most, your trusted advisor, your best friends, your spouse, they get tired of it. I mean, really, you talk about this kid for a while, and it's like, come on, let's talk about my kid now. We know it's just your closest people will get tired of it. And they'll, not knowingly, that's not intentionally hurting you, but they'll say, come on, can we talk about something else? Or I think it's time to start, move on to something else. Or you should probably describe it differently because I've heard that before. Well, that's a good thing. So a lot of people will actually stop or change because they listen to somebody that says, I'm over this already. When the reality is, when you get to that point, especially in marketing, when you get to that point where those closest to you start to poo-poo on your parade, that means the public is just now starting to pay attention. So you don't change anything. So you don't give up on the book, and you just keep pressing forward, and that's when the success happens. It's a whole, 3 feet from diamonds or whatever that book. It's a great book, whatever it is. We got to read it. But the whole concept of just giving up or changing right before you get to that success.
I was thinking of the resistance that was personified in Do the Work.
Yeah.
That's one of the books, and anytime you feel that resistance, you're just about to succeed. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I did not think that a author that was one of the big troubles with being an author is that whenever you write a book and people start to criticize it.
Yeah.
I think the
Absolutely.
fear of other people would be a big hindrance to writing a book. So how, besides writing and getting to that point and pushing through that barrier, what if I'm at the very beginning, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like I want to do it, but then I'm nervous about, well, I get to the point when like I say, no one wants to hear what I say. Should I just call it quits because I don't have the confidence? Because I think that could be it, but or should I just try to have a vision? I mean, how do I get past that point?
You just got to muscle through it, because we all every book I write, I'm like, oh my gosh, is anybody ever going to really want to listen to this or read this, or is this just me? But you've got to get past it. It's just really that, it's just it's the first obstacle. It's that first step of many steps to get to where you're at. And of course, your content will grow, your confidence in who you are will grow, and then as you're sharing it with the audience, if you listen and you engage with the audience, they can even help you perfect it. So by the time it does hit the streets, it's going to be a great book. But you've got to get past those initial, that initial fear, which all of us have.
Very cool. So where is Morgan James Publishing today, and where's it going?
Oh my gosh, we're having so much fun. Now, we've been in business now since 2003. We're having so much fun. I quitted. I'm an entrepreneur first, publisher last. So I quit my day job as a banker in '04, which is a really funny story too, how that did. When my company bought 40,000 copies of the book I wrote, requiring my bosses to read it, it kind of creates an interesting aspect with your day job. So that was fun. But anyhow, I quit the day job in 2004, and we focused primarily on the types of books that we're talking about today. Self-help, how-to, general nonfiction that are great content that an author is leveraging like crazy. But I've learned over the last 14 years that entrepreneurs write fiction. Entrepreneurs write faith-based books. Entrepreneurs write kids' books. So today we've got a fiction division. For us, it's a clean fiction. And we have a faith-based division, and we have a kids division, because those entrepreneurs are still leveraging those books. There's a bigger picture behind the books. That's where we get really excited. Sure, we want to educate and entertain and inspire somebody, but if it's doing it for a reason, supporting a nonprofit, teaching a moral or a lesson, they're getting out of it, that's when we can really shine. So over the years, we've slowly kind of filtered out those. In fact, next year we're launching a mini book imprint where we're doing pocket-sized books again, pure content, 8,000 words, 10,000 words, just really tight stuff. I'm really excited about that. But we opened up an office in Nashville last year to kind of tap into those faith-based markets, and then we just opened up an office this month, last month, in Australia. So we're trying to take over the world, of course, one book at a time.
One book at a time. Why Australia?
Funny thing, Australia, one of our first authors, who he actually was a referral to us in 2004 when we really had nothing to offer. His book had just gone out of print with his publisher. I think it was a Penguin imprint, big publisher, because it's good content, bestseller, but it started to sell less. This is funny. It started to sell less than 20,000 copies a year, so no longer relevant to the publisher. Oh my gosh, relevant to the author. It's like 40 grand a year of income for him, right? So he ended up bringing it to us. We fell in love with it, fell in love with him, and all we did was republish it. Again, we were still growing up as a publisher. We just kind of republished it in the U.S. market, and boom, started selling 30,000 copies a year.
Very cool.
Amazing. Well, he was from Australia, so I've always had this love for Australia. And then over the last few years, as we've played in the last 14 years, playing this entrepreneurial space, we realized that Australia is a boon for entrepreneurs. I mean, the dollar exchange is great, but they're rising entrepreneurs out of Australia on a regular basis. Exciting things are happening. They're putting on live events that are filling the rooms with thousands of people, where here, even locally, it's hard unless you're a true celebrity, to fill up with 100 people. In Australia, it's just thriving. So we see an opportunity that we can help them take it even further. So we just have to find the right people, the right time to do it. And I think we're there.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I'm excited to see where y'all go, and I bought Shareology.
Oh, wonderful.
I'm making my way through that. I think as a marketer,
You'll love it.
That was really cool. How people share things and why. It's just fascinating. I recommend that one.
I like Shareology because in my conversations with Brian Kramer, the author, of course, we really connected really well. He was a referral from our first New York Times bestseller, and really resonated with him about sharing and whatnot. And we talked about competition. I mean, competition is a vital part of our life. But for me, and he agrees the same way, is I don't believe I have really any real competition. I have opportunities for collaboration. I have ways that we can share and refer back and forth to each other, help each other grow, and it's been working. But I love Shareology. You'll love it too.
Very cool.
Side note, our highest book on foreign rights, where we also have a division that will license our titles to be published in other countries and other languages with other publishers, highest grossing foreign rights book in our history, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to see you guys grow, continue to bring on authors and see what books that y'all put out again. So
I appreciate that.
Appreciate the time that you gave me.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this podcast or watching this video. Again, this is David Hancock, Morgan James Publishing. You can find out more information at morganjamespublishing.com. And the book I have right here is
I can't spell it, but he can say it right.
Entrepreneurial Author, Achieving Success in Balance as a Writer in the 21st Century. And until next time, we'll see you later.